All right. Very well. Welcome, everybody, to your December 2nd, 2021 meeting of the Yolo County Climate Action Commission. It's an exciting agenda today, and I will start by, first of all, recognizing a mistake I made in the agenda. I failed to include Commissioner Austin and Alvarez as in the list of commissioners. My apologies to you on that. But with that, I think I will do a quick roster just to make sure that I've see everyone who is here. So I will start with Suzanne Reed here. Robin. I think I saw Robin. Yep. Mark.
I'm here.
Andrew.
Here.
Adelita.
Here.
Chris. NJ.
Here.
And for the rest of the commissioners, we have Sarah Morgan with Yosha Dihi, Winton Nation, with us today as an ex officio. We also have Matt Dulcich from UC Davis, ex officio, and Bernadette. I saw Bernadette. Yep. And Pelayo is, we are missing Pelayo. And
Right here.
oh, there he is. There you are. Sorry.
It took me a while to connect.
I just saw you. So, and then of course we have supervisors, Saylor and Provenza. I don't see Supervisor Provenza, but I'm sure he will join us shortly. So, since you will be having a selection of officers, what I'll do, I'll lead the meeting up until that point, and from then on, if it's the will of the appointed chair to continue on calling the agenda items, we can do it that way. Or if it is the will for me to just continue on for this meeting, we can do that as well. So with that, the very first item on the agenda, and as I have explained before, this, until further notice, will be a standing item for you to reaffirm and approve, make the two findings that are in your agenda regarding remote meetings. I will read them out for you. And the findings that we're asking and recommending this commission to make is that the Yolo County Climate Action Commission has reconsidered the circumstances of the state of emergency proclaimed for the COVID-19 pandemic. And number two, local officials continue to impose or recommend measures to promote social distancing. What that does, it allows and reaffirms the ability for this commission to meet remotely. So I am looking for a motion on that item.
So moved.
Second.
Suzanne Reed, and second by, I didn't catch, Andrew? Mark. Motion passes, so we have ourselves a meeting. The second item on the
Taro, did
Yeah.
you call a roll? You said the motion passes, but you didn't call.
Thank you. Still getting the hang of
It takes
this.
more than two of us to
Still
make
getting the hang of it.
to make it. Yeah, I know.
Approve with two. That sounds great. Okay, here we go. Commissioner Reed,
Aye.
Commissioner Datel,
Aye.
Commissioner Allman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kim,
Aye.
Commissioner Serena,
Aye.
Commissioner White,
Aye.
Commissioner Novo,
Aye.
Commissioner Austin,
Aye.
and Commissioner Alvarez.
Is that me?
Yep.
Okay.
So motion passes, and yes, now the motion passes. We have ourselves a meeting. Moving on to the second item, and I purposely put this item before public comment, just to make sure that the commissioner, that there is the officers of the commission, and again, so that the chair and vice chair can continue on with the meeting if that's the will of those two individuals. So as you can tell, there is no presentation here. It's fairly simple. We're looking for a motion to elect a chair and the vice chair, and we can do it one at a time, or however the will of the commission may be. And I see that Supervisor Provenza just joined us too.
So Taro, you would open it to nominations now.
Correct. That's
Yep.
yes.
And probably one officer at a time.
That works for me.
Well, I'd like to nominate Andrew as the chair.
I second.
So we have a nomination for Andrew and a second. And let's call the roll.
Oh, wait. Can I?
You need to ask if there are other nominations.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yes. And I am very honored. Thank you so much, Chris and Suzanne. I was not ready for that. At this exact moment in time, I think I will have to respectfully decline the chair nomination. I might be open to vice chair though, but the chair nomination I will have to respectfully decline. Thank you though.
Very good. Any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Mark Ullman as chair.
I second.
May I comment at this point?
Yep.
Okay. I'm a member of two other standing committees, and as Charlie will attest, it was somewhat difficult for me to steer my way around when we're trying to establish a standing date for this commission. I'm a member of the VCE Community Advisory Committee. I'm also past chair and a member of the City of Woodland Sustainability Advisory Committee. So I'm really impacted by those memberships. And I really think that would impact my ability to effectively chair this commission.
Very good. Thank you. Other nominations?
I would like to nominate NJ Mavando as chair.
This is Andrew. I second that.
Any other nominations at this point?
I'm not sure MJ even heard that because I see her audio is still trying to connect.
Oh,
There she is.
hi, NJ. I don't know if you caught that, but you have been nominated for chair.
Yes, hi. I caught that. I apologize for the change. I was driving home and now I'm in my home office. I'm honored by the nominations. Thank you. I'm guessing the floor is open for discussions and additional nominations.
Not hearing any additional nominations. Are we ready for a vote? Seems like it. Commissioner Reed,
Aye.
Commissioner Daytel,
Aye.
Commissioner Allman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kim,
I
Commissioner Serena,
Aye.
Commissioner White,
Aye.
and please help me here. Do I skip NJ? Since
No,
is
she gets a
nominated?
vote.
Oh, she gets the vote.
Sure.
NJ,
Well, I accept the nomination. I vote aye. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Austin,
Aye.
and Commissioner Alvarez.
Aye.
Very good. We have a chair. Congratulations, NJ. And as I mentioned before in the meeting, you are welcome to take over leading the meeting. We still have a second officer. If you'd like me to finish that item and then continue on with the rest of the meeting, we can do that as well.
May I suggest that we continue with the nomination and voting for a vice chair and then go from there. Thank you.
Very good. So I'm open to nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Andrew Kim.
I second that.
Any other nominations? Seeing or hearing none, I'll take the roll. Commissioner Reed,
Aye.
Commissioner Datel,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Commissioner Kim,
Yes, I am honored. Thank you.
Commissioner Serena,
Hi.
Commissioner White,
Aye.
Commissioner Bondo,
Aye.
Commissioner Austin,
Aye.
and Commissioner Alvarez.
Aye.
Very good. Motion passes. Congratulations. You have it yourself, a chair and a vice chair. Great, great. So, NJ, what is your will? I'm happy to finish the meeting, calling the items, or you can take that over.
And I hope with the approval of my peers, including the vice chair, I will please ask you to continue leading us in the agenda. And then starting in January, I'll fully step into the role if it's okay.
Absolutely. Works
you.
for me. Great. Thumbs up. Very good. So moving on to the next item on the agenda, this is the item for public comment, which is reserved for public comment on items that are not on the commission's agenda. For items that are specific on the agenda, public comment will be taken at the time that that item is heard. Do we have any public comment or items not on the agenda? Charlie, do you see anyone, any hands raised?
Mark Allman's hand is raised.
So you have one
Oh.
hand raised.
Mark?
Yeah, this is Mark. I do want to comment. I sent a request to Supervisor Saylor a few days back, a couple of weeks back, I guess, in regard to the Tykert Schiffler mining project and if it could be considered by this commission during the approval process and prior to the vote of the Board of Supervisors. And he got back to me pretty promptly and said he consulted with Supervisor Provenza and it was beyond the scope of this commission. And the more I look into this project, the more I begin to realize that there are going to be some impacts on the constituent Yolo County city that I'm a member of, Woodland, in terms of truck traffic in particular. And there may be other environmental impacts as well due to the energy used in the actual extraction and whatnot. And I realize that this project has been under considerable evaluation for a period of years. But it seems to me that if the goals of the county's climate action plan and this commission are to become carbon negative by 2030, we can't systemically build in a potential greenhouse gas generator of this magnitude without carefully considering it. I know there are many variables, but I would request that as we move forward, that this be agendized for this commission to consider and potentially appoint a task group to look into it and then come back and report to the commission prior to final action by the supervisors. I know this has also been discussed with the chair of the County Planning Commission. And I don't know how that has been resolved at this point, but that would be my request. And at this time, if it is out of scope for this commission, I would like to perhaps hear the rationale for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Suzanne, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Regarding not this particular project, but in general, the resolution calls for the county board of supervisors, before it makes any decisions, to take into consideration the impact of the project on our goals with respect to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and meeting the objectives of the resolution. So I'm not sure on the time frame on this particular matter, whether such a report or item has been prepared, but I just wanted to make the comment that that analysis is required before the board can act by virtue of the resolution.
So,
Daro, may I make a
yes.
comment?
Yes, Don.
Jim may have some thoughts as well. First of all, I think the agendas for this group probably should have a topic that is member comments or report outs or something, because Mark, as a member, your only place you could look to bring up a topic like this was in public comment. And I think that's maybe not quite appropriate, but that's, I think you had no choice, but I think in the future, you might want to have your agendas have a place so that members can bring forward matters of interest to ask. You might even have a long range calendar of some kind so that you can conduct your business and know what's coming up in the future. One of the topics that we're going to have quite a few topics, I would think, come up. Different issues, off-highway vehicle might be one. There's going to be any land use issue that's coming up before us, before the Board of Supervisors, in the time that this group is working on the plan, you're going to want to have an interest in these things. And as individuals, you're free to speak on anything that you choose to before the board or participate. But at this point, the Planning Commission has the responsibility for that project review. And there's been quite a bit of work spent on it already. I think really the best way for this commission to weigh in at this point is, in my opinion, and I think consistent with your scope, is to look at the policy matter before you, not the individual projects at this point. The policy matter could be that the mining operations, plural, all across the KP, all across Cache Creek, you may want to look at that whole policy framework as a part of the plan. There could be policy issues around water use, around land use, around mining practices or mercury. I think there are a number of really interesting and compelling issues that need attention, and it would be good for the group to look into those. But looking at a specific project could easily get you down a road that you may never emerge from. If every project or an issue that comes before the board in the next year and a half or however long we're at this work together, it becomes a matter for you to weigh in on, then the overall plan may not get on the agenda. We've got bylaws, we got charged, we just elected officers tonight, or you just did. And I'm very interested in having you pursue the work that the board has specifically charged you with, have the Planning Commission do the work that they're specifically charged with, have you all look at what policy issues and policy criteria and framework you'd like the Planning Commission to consider for issues that might come before them in the future. But really, we, as an appointed advisory committee with a specific charge, I think your best value to the Board of Supervisors and the county operations is for you to pursue that. I know that many of you have been contacted on this particular issue with the Tykert proposal to do the Schiffler mining operation, and I know that many of you and many others are really digging into that and trying to gather and gain an understanding and weigh the different matters and bring those forward. And you're free. I'm eager to hear all of your perspectives on that. I just think that this commission has I've already spoken for an awfully long time on just this point, but I think your time could be most valuable spent on working on the specific charge that you have, and have others participate in the actual processes for the other proposals. And Jim, that's the way I interpret the scope. And I know you and I haven't talked. I don't know a great deal on this. Do you want to say what your sense is?
Well, I think fundamentally I agree that the board did not give us that and did not contemplate us commenting on individual projects. That really is in the purview of the Planning Commission. But I think you're correct, though, that in general areas we could comment on mining as a whole, or any other practice as a whole, as part of to reach our climate goals and what we recommend to the Board of Supervisors. I think it would take a subsequent action of the board, and I don't think we would get it. That's not the county's approach. They have Planning Commission review pending projects, and then the board, with full staff support and with review of environmental documents, then makes the decision. And I think we have to be very careful not to go beyond our charter, because we want the support of the board in terms of developing and implementing a climate plan to get us to the negative carbon by 2030, and also the support of the board as they have in terms of some of the funding and letting us take a look at some of the out the gate projects that might benefit us in making progress toward this goal. But I don't think that the board had contemplated a role beyond that, and it would take us, I think, going back to the board in order to.
Thank you, supervisors. I see Bernadette.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'll just speak pretty briefly and reaffirm that I actually agree with the supervisors on this. So just as a point of order, in general, when I've served on commissions during the public comment period, we try to not comment and have a discussion beyond agendizing for a future meeting. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is, for the sake of transparency, we don't want to be making decisions or providing feedback when members of the public don't really get to weigh in because it's been brought up. So just in general, I'll make that comment. I fully support having an opportunity to put things on future agendas, and this is the kind of thing that we could do, not just for members, but also for public comment. And then with respect to the conversation that we're having around projects versus policies, with boards such as these, I mean, there is a discussion of we could propose this to the Board of Supervisors, but just personally, I'm interested in looking at policies as opposed to projects, because I also agree that we could just get very much in the weeds, and if we stay focused on policies, I think that we can make more strides. So those are just my perspectives on those two pieces.
Thank you, Bernadette. NJ?
Yes, I agree with everything I heard so far. I just wanted to add the same thing in regard to public comments. I think I will encourage them if, our reaction will be, are we adding this to the next, agenda item? That way we will all have had time to think about it, to read or review any materials that is needed, and we will have had time to assess whether or not it fits within the canon of our commission. The second point I wanted to address and share, I was wondering, in regards to everything that has been shared so far, if we should consider an addendum to our charter. What I mean by that is I believe that we'll continue to have public comments, either regarding some projects or policies. And I was wondering if it would be a good idea to have in writing something that let the public know what to expect from the commission. One of the steps I encourage us to consider is, when a comment or project is brought to us and people are expecting action, our first step will be to assess whether or not this is in alignment with the work of the commission, meaning how is that project impacting the reduction of, carbon dioxide, for example. And so from there, what can we do in terms of analysis or recommendation to the existing policy and whatnot. So it's just something to consider. So again, just in brief, is number one step is this in alignment with our goals? And if yes, how can we integrate the data in the long-term goals? Thank you.
Thank you. Adelita?
Yeah, NJ kind of took my words out of my mouth. So thank you, NJ. And I also hear the supervisors around, policy versus project. I appreciate that lens. And, I also, like Mark, sit on the Woodland Advisory Sustainability Committee. So I think this is something we should also look at there. It will be impacting Woodland residents, Woodland, roads. And so I think there's a couple places that we can assess the impacts and potentially do outreach to the community so that they are aware that this project is coming. I don't think a lot of folks in the community are aware that this is going to be coming up and rolling out for the next 30 years. So I think that's an important element to consider when we're thinking about not just impacts, but like the community, how they will be reacting to this ongoing project in the neighborhoods that it will be impacting.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Not seeing anything. Charlie, do you see anything on your end?
Nope, I don't see any hands raised.
Very good. So we will move on to the next item on the agenda, item number 4, which is to approve the minutes of the November meeting, which is attachment A in your packet. So at this point, I'm just looking to either for a motion or if anyone has any comments, any corrections, revisions to that material.
I move adoption of the minutes.
Second.
So it has been moved by Commissioner Reed and second by Commissioner Kim. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Reed.
Aye.
Commissioner Daytel.
Aye.
Commissioner Allman.
Aye.
Commissioner Kim.
Aye.
Commissioner Serena.
Aye.
Commissioner White.
Aye.
Commissioner Vondo.
Aye.
Commissioner Austin.
I'll abstain.
And Commissioner Alvarez.
Aye.
Motion passes. At this point, I wanted to take a quick moment, since we are in the issue of minutes, sort of reporting back about the last meeting. One of the things that I wanted to report to the commission is that from the staff side, we've been looking at a lot of comments and suggestions and information that is coming in from commissioners that they're in the spirit of sharing with the other commissioners. And what we'd like to do in order to keep that communication somewhat manageable and managed for both staff and for the commissioners is that we would like to report out to the commissioners on a bi-monthly basis, roughly between meetings, all of the communications that we receive from you and suggestions and so on. And we would put those in some level of format, perhaps a newsletter or some other update document that you would receive. And that way you're not getting emails scattered throughout the month, but rather in a bi-monthly basis. So I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that, and of course continue to share all the good information that you have been sharing already with us. So that's great. So with that, we're moving on to agenda item number 5, and it's interesting. Mark, you kind of prompted it a little bit with your early comments on your nomination there. As you see on your agenda, we did have the third Wednesday of every month as a tentative, and then of course we were reminded that Commissioner Allman does have another commitment on the third Monday of every month. So
Carl, that's actually the third Wednesday is the conflict.
I'm sorry, third Wednesday. Yes, sorry. Yes, thank you. So I guess that we can continue to look for a better date, and Charlie could send out another poll for folks. It did appear that the third Wednesday worked for everybody else. And I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot, Mark, necessarily, but I wonder if there is a way that we could do an earlier meeting time if it works for everybody, and that way we keep that date. I don't want to overwhelm you either, Mark. Back-to-back meetings, I think that might work, but I'm throwing it out there as an idea.
I would say if necessary, I'd be open to doing that. The Woodland Sustainability Committee meeting time, it begins at 6 on the third Wednesday of every month. So I'd be open to an earlier time if that would move things forward. I'd be willing to do that.
So we could throw out a 4 or a 4:30 start date for this commission. How does, it's just an idea. I don't know that we don't necessarily have to settle it today, but I'm open to suggestions.
I hate to be the prima donna here in the group, but I would accept that with the proviso that if the meeting ran longer beyond 6, I'd have to depart at 6 o'clock.
Sure. So I see hands up. So I'll start with Adelita.
Oh, yeah, I also have the same conflict as Mark. We both serve in that committee. So I too need to, one, have an earlier start time and would have to leave at 6.
Okay. Thank you. Chris.
I just wanted to say that there's no rule that says we have to do this at dinner time. You know, we could meet at lunch. We could meet for breakfast. There are all sorts of times of the day.
Thank you for that. One of the reasons sometimes we pick this time is that it allows for public participation for folks that may be working during the day and may want to participate. Usually that's why we choose a later time. But you have a really good point. Suzanne, you're muted.
You just made my point, Tara, which is that we do try to schedule at a time that members of the public find it convenient to participate. So, and then my question was there a second, when you did the doodle poll, what was the next most popular day or time?
There were 2 dates that had one less well, I guess there would be 3 dates. The fourth Monday, the January 24th, and the fourth Thursday, which would be January 27th, had the same amount of votes of 9. So there were 3 dates in total with 9. Those latter 2, the 24th or 27th, would be the ones with the second most.
And those are the fourth Thursday of every month. With that, so that would translate to being the fourth Thursday of every month, and the what?
It'd be the fourth Monday or the fourth Thursday. Let me pull that up.
But it looked like there wasn't one day that worked absolutely well for everybody. Is that right?
yeah, 3 of them would have come in with 9 people being available of the group.
So just for discussion. Oh, sorry, Mark, go ahead.
I have to apologize again. That lands directly on top of the Valley Clean Energy Community Advisory Committee meeting date. It's the 4th Thursday of every month.
Thursday.
Sorry. You can move forward easily by dispensing with me if you wish. That seems to be the cleanest answer at this point.
Well, I'd like to maybe suggest, oh, wait, I got more hands. Bernadette?
Well, is it just Thursday? Because Mondays would work better for me as well. So if Thursdays are a problem and Wednesdays are tricky, then we could either move it to Mondays, which again would be better for me. And I might also say that ideally we have public comment at the beginning, but we could also, if we need to have an earlier start, have public comment at the end of the agenda to accommodate people who need to join, say like after 4:30.
Sure. So maybe again, Mark, do you still have your hand up? Just making sure. Oh. Maybe in the interest, maybe we can suggest we can maybe table this if we're not sure about today, or if you feel that maybe that was it 4th Monday, we can move forward with a 4th Monday and perhaps move it to 4:30 or 4.
I could do too is put out another, after this meeting table, and put out another poll, so we at least identify one for this January meeting, and then kind of continue table it for now.
Okay, let's Don?
I'd suggest that staff work with the chair and the vice chair and arrive at a meeting date that you all think is going to work, and then just set it. And I think you're on the verge of getting into people's vacation plans as they start to tell you what their conflicts are. So I think it'd be better to have NJ make an executive decision here, and Charlie can share all the doodle poll stuff instead of saying just one at a time, and see where things are. But leave it to the chair and the staff.
Good suggestion. So I think that we'll take that recommendation, gather the information, and then we will coordinate with the chair and vice chair with a recommendation at an upcoming meeting. Sound good? Great. Moving on, the next item on the agenda, well, in the interest of full, I don't think that this item necessarily warrants public comment, but I will put it out there anyway in case there's any member of the public that wishes to comment on this agenda item. Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 6, which is to approve the timeline and the process for the at-large commission member appointments, which is attachment B on your agenda packet. I'm trying to pull it up myself on my side.
You have a hand raised as well, Tara.
So if you recall from our last meeting, we had a conversation about opening up the recruitment. What should be the logical time for that recruitment? We have 2 more at-large positions available, and in your staff report, we've laid out a proposed plan, which basically, in summary, we would take the month of December to continue recruitment by commission staff and supervisors with a deadline to apply by January 7th. We would then upload all the applications that we have, as we have in the past, for your review. And then by the end of January, we would be looking for your recommendations with the target of making that selection at your February meeting. So that's the timeline in summary. Suzanne.
Yeah, I just had a couple of comments. Starting with, if we're not going to meet until it sounds like maybe the last week of January. Maybe that deadline could be extended to January 14th and give us a bit more space over the holiday period. And then the second is I've been soliciting or making people aware, or trying to make people aware of the opportunity. I noted that when you click on the commission to get a description of it, that it's that piece of paper, that PDF that lists the commissioners and but it's not complete. It hasn't been updated with our 2 new commissioners. And so it'd be helpful to be able to send that out to people that we're soliciting as an explanation of what the commission is and what it's doing. And the third thing would be to get the charter posted where it could, the final version of the charter as adopted by the supervisors. So that could also be sent out to people that we are asking to consider joining the commission or applying for membership. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Suzanne. Robin?
Yeah, it was in the minutes of the meeting that we just approved, and that was a request I made to know what the distribution list is that the staff are using in general for things related to this commission, because it would be good to know what groups are already being contacted with the information about these open positions. So I still like to have that info. Thanks.
Thank you, Robin. Charlie, I don't know where we are with that. I don't know if we have the list. We can share the list because a lot of those are.
Yeah, I have a list. I have the sustainability, everyone who subscribed to that. I'll export it. I just have to remove the emails. And I think the thought was to include it in the next, or the bi-weekly update that we'll send after this. We've been aggregating some things to send your way, but that information will be
It's
with you
coming.
shortly.
Okay, thank you. So there is a suggestion by Commissioner Reed to maybe extend the deadlines out a week. Yeah, given that you're right, it's more likely than not that that things will start moving out towards the end of the month. I don't have any problem with that, but if it's the will of the commission, we can do that. And with that adjustment on the date for deadline submission, which would be January 14th, and of course we would move then the us uploading those applications another week, and that gives you the time to review and make decisions at your February meeting. That would work fine, and if you guys are okay with those adjustments, we can entertain a motion.
So I guess I'll go ahead. I motion for the application deadline to the at-large commissioner seats to be extended to January 14th.
Second.
So moved by NJ and second by Suzanne. Any additional discussion? So I'll call the roll. Commissioner Reed,
Aye.
Commissioner Datel,
Aye.
Commissioner Allman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kim,
Aye.
Commissioner Serena,
Aye.
Commissioner White,
Aye.
Commissioner Bondo,
Aye.
Commissioner Austin,
Aye.
and Commissioner Alvarez.
Aye, sorry.
I was remiss of asking for any public comment on this item. But I'm sure I would have been stopped if there had been any. So motion passes. Moving right on. Item number 7 on your agenda is an update on climate action and adaptation plan scope of work development. And I'm going to look to Michael.
Good evening, commissioners. Michael McCormick. pleasure to report back. We've started interviewing other counties and other jurisdictions that have gone through similar climate action planning process where there's a strong role for a climate action commission or a similar body. Our first interview was yesterday with Monterey County, and we've identified about 8 other jurisdictions we're going to be interviewing. We're setting those meetings up. Julia Olson, the Civic Spark member, Tara Chibura, and myself will be participating and leading in those meetings. And we'll be coming back to the commission with outcomes of that, along with scope recommendations for the RFP as that's being developed over the next couple of months. And lessons learned. I think one of the most exciting things we're getting from the interviews and from the more informal conversations we've had is that folks have a lot of lessons learned. There's certainly mistakes we shouldn't be repeating as we move forward through this process. And we want to make sure that's reflected in the RFP and in the consultant structure, how the consultant may work with the Climate Action Commission and county staff as well. And as the commission has talked about previously, there's a dynamic between the cities and the county. A number of organizations, a number of jurisdictions are working on climate initiatives and climate action plans. So we're also listening to those counties and understanding how they're working with their colleagues and other jurisdictions within the counties and within the regions. So it's a very exciting set of conversations to be had to inform the RFP process and deeper dives earlier next year when we're actually able to start responding and discussing the content of the RFP. There are a couple key scheduling items that we are designing the engagement process around and the RFP development process around. One is the onboarding of the sustainability coordinator. Taro's briefed the commission on this previously, but that's a really critical role for the development of the RFP, management of the RFP through the public process, and the interviewing of the consultants. The other piece is there is not a designated budget for the climate action adaptation plan at this point. So the RFP process early next year will also help inform staff and the Board of Supervisors on the potential budget for the climate action adaptation plan. So all these items will be coming back to the commission for review and recommendation. So we're really excited to do that. But right now we're just getting started. So not a lot to share from a content standpoint at this point.
Yes, Robin.
Yeah, can you tell us what the 8 jurisdictions are, please?
Certainly, we're certainly not guaranteed to interview all of these. It depends on their responsiveness. But we have San Diego County. So there's a longer list than the 8. We're aiming for 8 out of the 14. So we have San Diego County, Ventura County, Santa Barbara County, Monterey County, Sonoma County, Contra Costa County, Sacramento County, the city of Oakland, which has a very unique equity climate action plan process they went through several years ago, Providence, Rhode Island, which has done some really interesting work on equity and climate, as has Evanston, Illinois, Ann Arbor, Michigan, Alameda County as well. I've had an informal conversation with staff there. They have a request for proposals on the street right now. So there's a very active conversation happening about how to accommodate some of the things in there. And each of them have different governance structures, unique attributes. Many of them have lessons learned about structuring budget, how to work within the context of CEQA and the climate action planning process. So that's one thing that we'll bring back earlier next year. So there's a lot of different questions we're asking them. We're actually just working through the formalized set of questions we'll be asking, and those questions will then be fed back to the commission as a set of responses. We're letting them know that we're aggregating their responses, so we're not going to be specific about specific counties' experiences in specific situations, because we want to make sure that we're having a comfortable, open conversation with them. So we'll be bringing back aggregated responses to help inform the process.
Thank you.
Mark?
Yes, I believe it was in our first meeting. I was happy to hear that Yolo was one of 3 counties in California that had set carbon negativity as a goal for 2030. And I was just wondering if the other 2 are on your list.
I believe that's 3 in the United States, not in California.
Okay.
That's a really good question. I'm gonna have to take a look at that. That's not a pre-screen that I looked at.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to hear the approaches if possible, particularly with regard to GHG monitoring.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions or comments on this item? There's no real action for the commission to take here, so seeing none, any public comment? Seeing none, we move on to item number 8, which is to approve the timeline for development and prioritization of early actions, including the due date for submittal. And this is attachment C in your agenda packet. So staff will lead this. Suzanne, you have a question? You're muted.
Not used to not being able to talk. I would like to hear the staff presentation first.
Oh, okay.
You'll probably answer half of my questions that way.
So who from staff? I'm looking at.
I'm happy to present, Taro, if that works for you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Petrea. I was just looking in my little squares here. Who was taking it?
Sure. So we wanted to ask the commission tonight for basically 2 separate actions. One is to approve the early action timeline and also early action prioritization criteria. We were very pleased with the robust discussion last time on the early action memo and wanted to make sure that we had very clear direction going forward that meets the commission's expectations. So as you may recall, you reviewed the early action memo at the last meeting and requested additional time to submit early actions and more information about each action to inform the commission's decisions and also prioritization criteria. So the first and probably the simplest element of this presentation tonight is really just to approve the timeline for commission consideration of submitting early actions, updating the actions memo, and also prioritizing actions. So what we're proposing, but we are very interested in commission feedback, is that tonight you approve the prioritization criteria, that December 30th or the end of the month is the deadline for submitting additional early actions. At the January 19th meeting, again, I know there's discussion about when that meeting will be, but at your next January meeting, review the early actions memo and prioritize the actions. And based on those prioritized actions, staff would then develop detailed project descriptions and budgets associated with those prioritized actions. And in February, the commission would review those project descriptions and receive an initial update on funding opportunities, because the goal here, as you may recall, for early actions is to move quickly to both secure funding and implement these actions and match them with potential funding sources. And then in March, have the commission approve the early action grant strategy, which would essentially match up the priority actions with grant funding. And I'll stop there before I get to the prioritization criteria to just see if you have any questions about that timeline or steps, if you want to add steps, change steps. We just wanted to put something before you in writing for discussion. I'm also happy to continue with the prioritization overview if that's the commission's desire as well, and then we could have questions at the end, but I just didn't want to talk too much.
There are 2 hands up, so do we want to continue or do you have questions now?
I'm
Suzanne?
happy to continue. My comments are on the criteria.
Got it. Chris?
I too have a comment on the criteria, but that comment may change our timeline. And specifically this week, Kalawea updated the CalEnviro screen map. And so not only is the map different with different disadvantaged areas, but there's new ways of looking at the map. And so I just wonder if we need to talk a little bit about that before we dive into the timeline.
Okay, well, let's go through the prioritization criteria discussion then we can circle back to the timeline. Sounds like that's a good recommendation. So again, I just want to start off with referring back to what we heard at the last commission meeting and make sure that we understood the commission's direction at the last meeting. And then I wanted to explain why staff are recommending something a little bit different than what we heard at the last commission meeting, because we did have a lot of internal discussion about this item. So at the last meeting, the commission asked staff to consider 8 criteria, which are all listed in the staff report for early actions. And we took those 8 different criteria back and discussed them internally and realized that some of them were eligibility criteria. So that it made more sense to have 2 sets of criteria. One is eligibility criteria and the other is prioritization criteria. So the eligibility criteria is that the 5 items that are listed, that Yolo County must be able to work independently or with partners to complete the actions by June 30th, 2024. And you've seen an earlier version of these eligibility criteria in the project description, but thanks to your discussion, we thought a little bit more deeply about those eligibility criteria and refined them for you tonight. Obviously open to additional discussion and changes. But we really wanted to make sure, in order to meet a tight timeline like June 30th, 2024, that Yolo County could work independently and wasn't relying on somebody else to get the project done. It doesn't mean we can't have partners. We've heard loud and clear from the commission and from supervisors that it's important to be working with our city partners and with other nonprofits. But at the same time, the county has to have some control over that action or be able to move it quickly. The second eligibility criteria is that it has to advance implementation of the 2020 resolution, which is to achieve net carbon neutrality by 2030. And the third is that early actions must be grounded in existing policies or listed in adopted plans. Fourth, that it must benefit the unincorporated areas of the county. We understand there's a discussion and we're planning to have that at a later commission meeting about working outside of the unincorporated area, but at the very least to be eligible, an early action should benefit the unincorporated area. And then 5, that early actions have the ability to be funded and implemented in the near term. So those we are considering eligibility criteria rather than what you would use to actually rank the different early actions. So I'll stop there on the eligibility criteria and see if anybody has any questions, and then I'll go into the prioritization criteria. So Bernadette, I see your hand up. Suzanne, did you want to comment on eligibility criteria too, or just, okay.
I'll wait for prioritization as well, so I'll comment on both.
Okay, so I'll keep going if I don't hear any questions on eligibility. Okay. So prioritization criteria, this is where we're really going to be looking for input from you tonight, because we've struggled as staff to come up with the appropriate way to prioritize, to provide you with criteria. So we hope at least we've started with a foundation for you. So the first is that the early action builds from or advances existing collaborations or partnerships. And we have as a potential criteria, yes or no, but we could also propose to have a change to this criteria that is the number of partnerships that it advances. So you could have, 3 categories. So how soon the early action can be implemented relative to other proposals, whether the early action benefits disadvantaged communities as defined by CalEnviro screen, whether the early action reduces greenhouse gas emissions, and we would have to come up with low, medium, or high impact, Finally, whether the early action is affordable. So for example, coming up with criteria for, it would rank higher if the early action costs less than 50,000, and it would, receive less points if if it's more expensive. So those are the 5 criteria that we came up with based on the last commission discussion. And since there's a number of questions, I will stop there. And we also, I will say one more thing, is that there was there's also a question about whether we should assign a numerical score or not to the criteria, whether you should just use the information from the prioritization discussion to inform the commission's priorities versus coming up with a numerical score. So I think, Suzanne, did you want to go first, and then Bernadette, and then Matt, and then Andrew?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for those explanations. One of my critical concerns is if these projects are need-based, because we don't have a lot of community assessment data that we've been relying on for various of these actions. And so I'm wondering where community needs or population needs is factored into the decision-making. The second is I would think a criteria might also be whether the project in itself could be a model that ultimately could be scaled up and applicable in other areas of the county. And also if that project is sustainable or has the potential to become sustainable through continuous funding stream or participation or support. Mm-hmm. And that I think a sustainable and project with the capacity to be a scale-up model is should be prioritized over one that's what I call one-offs, one and done, and then everybody forgets about it and doesn't collect the data as to how it worked or why it did or didn't. And then with respect to affordability, I really think that there ought to be a cost benefit aspect to determining whether how much it costs ought to be weighed against how much benefit it would contribute to our overall objectives. And those are the comments that I have.
Bernadette?
Yeah, thanks for all that. So I'll answer your last question first around what would you do with this? I think it might be really useful to indeed provide scoring to help us with ranking, but really not use that as a way to kind of remove potential considerations and just bring it sort of in a ranked format based on the scoring towards the group. Sorry for the beeping in the background. And then to get to the comments around the eligibility and prioritization. So I'll make 2 comments. The first is the eligibility criteria number 3 and prioritization criteria number 2. Just something that I want to keep in the back of our minds is that when we had the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, we had a similar thing like, hey, let's really prioritize shovel ready. The tricky thing is that things that projects that align with existing plans and or maybe quote unquote shovel ready may actually be approved under older and possibly less sustainable land use planning models. So that's just something we kind of want to be cognizant of. What we can kind of think about wordsmithing, but we might want to put something about, like shovel ready, but still advancing climate goals or already meets all of the eligibility criteria and is shovel ready, just to kind of really be really clear about that. So that's one comment around that sort of shovel ready land use planning approvals. The second comment I have is on prioritization criteria number 3. And I found it really interesting that those of us from West Sacramento are like, hey, because really disadvantaged communities were only, at least in 3.0, only in West Sacramento. My quick look at the one that just got approved in the last couple of weeks also was in West Sac, which, hey, I live there, you know, it's near and dear to my heart, but it's also a really urban community. So that's one issue, is that we don't have the really deep geographic spread of the high scoring disadvantaged communities per CalEnviro screen. The other issue is with rural communities. Communities get obscured by the census tracts. So you may have pockets of quote unquote disadvantage that are obscured when it's a larger census tract that doesn't meet that criteria. So what I might recommend is a and or approach, which is actually something that the state takes into account. You know, you don't need to take this verbatim, but just for you to think about. So you could look at CalEnviro screen, define disadvantaged communities, or one thing terms we've used are also state-defined vulnerable communities. That also really speaks to some of the climate change issues, as well as high opportunity areas. It can be a way of talking about high risk or low income or low wealth communities, but talking about these high opportunity areas specifically in the sense that when you put investment, they get much more bang for your buck, because there's so much opportunity to improve from a climate change or environmental justice perspective. So hopefully that was comprehensive enough for you. Let me know if you need any clarification.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are there definitions for vulnerable community and high that you could send? Okay.
Vulnerable communities, there is a definition. High opportunity, there are a couple of different definitions.
Okay. Okay, great. And then I think Matt was next, and then Andrew, and then Palayo, and then Chris.
That's great. Thanks, Petrea. And I'll be, I think, pretty quick. On the eligibility criteria, I'm just wondering if looking at number 1 and number 5, there might be a way to combine those, because they are kind of overlapping. And in some ways, I think the first one is not quite clear on the intent of making it independent or with partners. So I think just taking a look at that. And then same thing, that those two might also overlap with the priority of the prioritization of item 2, thinking that if all of the projects can be implemented by the 2024 date, do we need further to prioritize them based on how soon they can meet that 24 or earlier than 2024? Like maybe 2024 is just good enough and we don't need to prioritize them sooner than that. But that's it.
And I think I want to flag that one as a question for the entire commission, because that would be really good feedback for us to have, whether anything that can be done before 2024 is they're all the same, or whether the commission cares about getting a project done in like 6 months and being like, yay, we got a project done, right? If there's no difference, that would be really great feedback to have at any time between now and 2024, or we want some quick wins, like show us what you got in 6 months, Yolo County, right? So,
and you know, one other point there is that shovel ready clause, because maybe the commission is a little bit impartial about whether there's a long planning period and design and short construction, or short planning and design and then long construction. Because the ultimate point is, when is it completed? Not so much whether it's shovel ready, or, you know, like the total timeline is more important than the distinction within the timeline effort. Yeah.
All right, and Andrew, I think, is next.
Yes, thank you. I agree that realization rate may be more important in some sense than just shovel readiness. Another point I wanted to make was I'm seeing that, you know, one of the criteria we discussed before was, you know, consideration of ARP funding eligibility. I don't know if that transferred over here. And I don't think it necessarily needs to be, can we leverage more ARP funding, as much as its ability to leverage any other funding. For example, the Build Back Better initiative, I heard from Congressman Garamendi all kinds of additional funding that's going to be in the pipeline that counties will be able to apply for. And so I don't know how that is going to be accounted for, if that needs to be a prioritization factor at all, and or maybe not, because the staff, yourself included, will just score it, you know, internally. I wanted to ditto what Commissioner Reed mentioned about, you know, scalability or sustainability. But I also wanted to add another element. So one is like, is the project or program, how sustainable is it? And or what is the long range impact? Is this like a project that's not sustainable, but will have like 10-year impact? Or is this, so I think there is some nuance there that you could look into. And I think I want to go back to what Commissioner Austin also mentioned in regards to scoring or ranking. I think, I guess what I was trying to say is, I don't know about scoring or ranking, but maybe it is ranking. It's like the idea of that there's a different weight associated to each of the criteria, that maybe as a commission, we vote, there's like 6, prioritization points, but which one is the most important? Because I think that could guide the staff and the consultants of how to approach these projects and or programs. Thank you.
So I wanted to comment on an omission that I made in my presentation, which you just brought up, Andrew, and I really appreciate it. And that is that on the funding side, we did have that discussion because you brought that up very clearly at the last meeting. And what we decided was that it was more important, and this is totally open for comment tonight, but that it's more important for the commission members to decide which are the most important projects, and then let staff and the county figure out how to fund them, like whether ARP matches with it, or it's a grant program, or they have to find some other source of funding. But like, you guys decide what are the projects that you want to prioritize, what are the ones the county should take on first, and then the county will come behind you and match it up with the appropriate funding source. And that's what and then that would come back to you for approval in February. So you would prioritize first based on the criteria. Then we would come back to you and say, here are the funding sources that we've matched to your priorities. And you can be like, oh, you forgot this one, or how about this one? But we would come back to you with like, here are your 5 projects, and these are the 2 we're funding with ARP. This one we're going to go for this grant for, and this one, we're still seeking funding. But we would actually do that work for you and come back. So I want to just make sure I had that clarification made that clarification to you on funding, that's what we discussed as staff and are recommending right now. So it's not that we've forgotten about the funding aspect. We just think it comes after you make the priorities.
Thank you for that point of information.
Okay, so I think Palaio is next, and then Chris, and then Carolyn.
Yes, thank you. Just to recommend that we use a numerical score for each prioritization criteria. Otherwise, I'm unclear how the decisions are going to be made if there's no numerical score. It
okay.
would really help the commissioners to figure out the priorities.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from the commissioners so far, just to reiterate, is to provide a numerical score, but also then the commissioners will have the opportunity then to decide different weights and or priority order based on those numerical scores. They're not wedded to the numerical scores, in other words, but they can take them into consideration. Okay, Chris. You're still on mute, I think.
Yes, Charlie's gonna share a screen because I'm not able to do it. And I just want to show you all really quickly a little bit about the new Calenviro screen. The old Calenviro always used a bunch of indicators to decide what was a disadvantaged community. And now in the new one, you can actually get in and look at those indicators. So Charlie, if you scoot that map part around a little bit, you can get into Yolo County. Unfortunately, the search isn't functional yet, so you have to slide it around. But you're looking there at the burden of diesel particulate. And you can zoom in or out. But if you'll notice on the side, there are lots of other choices that you can look at too. And so for instance, if you take a look at Yolo County by just looking at the pesticide use, it's huge. It's everywhere because we have lots of farms. You could also get into the population characteristics and look at places where they have high housing burdens or linguistic gaps. So the important part is there isn't just one disadvantaged community anymore. And so I think as we look at these projects, we really need to look at it not necessarily upon disadvantaged community, but which one of these burdens it's addressing, because some of these burdens have absolutely nothing to do with greenhouse gas emissions. So we don't need to decide this tonight, but I encourage you all to spend a little time playing with the new map and taking a look at it and seeing what stories it tells you to help you inform the priority actions. It's no longer just fix this one problem, we now have lots of opportunities to address separate problems and see separately how a solution can make, a tiny solution can make a big impact.
Thank you, Chris. Carolyn, did you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond quickly to Commissioner Andrew Kim's comments about and to explain the idea behind the ranking and weighting of the prioritization criteria. The only reason we suggested potentially not assigning a specific score for the actions was because everyone would bring a different weighting. So we didn't want the score to be the end story because every commissioner would have a different perspective on how to weight each criteria separately. So I just wanted to explain that rationale behind why we thought a ranking system of like a 1 to 10 versus a numerical score for each specific action would be a possible alternative.
Any other questions if or discussion? Because we are hoping that you'll approve the criteria tonight with any changes that you want to recommend. And what I can try to do, and I'm sure I will do it inexpertly, is to repeat back to you the changes I heard that you want and see if you all agree with those changes, unless there's other comments. Okay. Tara, is that okay if I just try and repeat back? Okay. All right. So what I heard, number one, is that you do want to have scoring, and then you'll have a discussion as a commission on whether or not to weight or apply other measures to the decisions about which ones are the top priorities. I also heard that you want to add a criteria. Well, I'll start with disadvantaged communities. You wanted to add 2 definitions. So it's not just California EnviroScreen, but it's or vulnerable communities and high opportunity areas to allow the commissioners to not be limited just to what Cal EnviroScreen says, but also to recognize that Cal EnviroScreen has more information now than it had in the past. And we should use that information as part of our discussion about priorities. I heard from also that we need to add another criteria for, which I think is a really good one, of is it sustainable? Is there ongoing funding for that project? I also heard a criteria which would be that is it applicable to other communities? Can it be repeated and or scaled up elsewhere? So is there, it's not just unique to Yolo County, but could be used by other communities. I heard for the eligibility criteria that we could combine 1 and 5. I didn't hear a firm decision on whether or not you wanted, or whether you wanted to weight projects that can be done in 6 months heavier than ones that can be done in 3. And so as staff right now, unless anybody has a preference, I would just stick with, if it can be done within 3 years, gets the same. Yeah, I'm seeing 1 thumbs up, couple nods. It gets the same weight. So I'm thinking that's what I'm hearing. And let me see, did I miss anything else? I heard the cost benefit, and I'm struggling a little bit with how to do this one. But because we're going to be providing the benefits in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, and then we're also going to be providing what the costs are. So it seems to me, unless you disagree, that it would make sense to come back with that information about what the benefits are, and come back with information about the costs are. And then that could maybe be something that the commission looks at when they make their decisions about priorities, and do your own sort of cost benefit analysis based on that and other factors. Suzanne's had her hand up, and NJ.
I think that what I meant, and the cost benefit, it is difficult sometimes to quantify. For example, the examples that Chris raised about a community being impacted by pesticides, for instance. Pesticides is it's a big impact. It has, there's some data around that, et cetera. But if from a policy perspective, if you go back and couple it with regenerative, land management and agriculture and other other ways to minimize use of pesticides, that it does have a greenhouse gas emissions reduction benefit. So I'll just leave you to struggle with that, but that's it. It wasn't a trade-off necessarily against GHG emissions reductions, per se, but a benefit to the overall objectives of the resolution.
So on that, I'm hearing maybe we should have like another criteria that provides other benefits. So there's like a place where we could communicate to the commission that there's other benefits, not that aren't greenhouse gas emission reductions.
Yes, I would say the co-benefits and the ecosystem services that might be provided by the project, as well as their direct relationship to greenhouse gas emissions, would be among those benefits that we would want to weigh against just an affordability criteria. And also the extent of the community that's impacted by them and the number of people that would benefit from the activities that are funded.
Is it any other comments, or is that it? Okay, NJ, I think you're next.
Thank you. I think the only thing I missed, unless you mentioned it and I didn't catch it, is also integrating the long-term impact as one of the criteria. Thank you.
Okay. And there was another one I missed, since speaking of things I missed. Matt had mentioned clarifying or partners, and I heard that we need to use a different term other than shovel ready too. Those are sort of small changes, but I heard both of those too. Okay, Robin.
Suzanne mostly clarified said what I was going to say, and I just wanted to endorse it, that many climate action plans have long lists of co-benefits for every action that's taken besides reducing greenhouse gases. So that definitely needs to be here. Also, the idea of creating a model or something that could be replicated, not just in other counties or other places, but even within Yolo County. So if we do something that's focused on one particular rural community, it might be replicable in other Yolo County communities as well.
Great. Okay. Andrew, and then Michael, and then Supervisor Saylor.
Yes, I wanted to thank Commissioner White's point about how the Cal Enviro screening, when we now think about disadvantage, there's actually kind of two potential criteria now. One is communities most vulnerable to climate impact, and then one is just communities most economically disadvantaged, which I'm now realizing those are two different types of communities. One is they may not get as much climate impacts, but they're just economically disadvantaged. And so in my context, my understanding of just like equity framing, it's not necessarily like climate impact, it was just economically disadvantaged. So I don't know if we want to keep, something to think about. As you mentioned, in addition to shovel ready, and although it's part of the eligibility requirement, like getting it done in 3 years, do we want another prioritization criteria where a faster realization rate of completion of the project? And slightly redundant, but if we're really in gung-ho about early wins, that could be something to keep in mind. And yes, thanks.
So just quick clarification on economically disadvantaged. Are you thinking this is true in the rural areas? I know I've explored almost every single definition that applies to Yolo County as an unincorporated area, and median household income is the one that's used if it's below the statewide median household income. Is that an okay proxy for economically disadvantaged, or are you thinking about something else?
I'll defer to you or the staff on that.
Okay. All right, Michael, and then Supervisor Saylor.
Thank you. I wanted to highlight, just from a process standpoint, that the early actions are intended to be just that, early actions. At the beginning part of the commission process, there's actually two specific other opportunities for actions that'll be coming forward from a process standpoint. One is the mitigation and adaptation measures that are incorporated in the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. which would be a longer term implementation timeline. But there's also an opportunity to do concurrent implementation of no regrets measures that are of clear benefit to the county, clearly understood to be decarbonization kind of focused initiatives with positive co-benefits. So part of the process on the early actions that I'm finding valuable is to get an understanding of commission priorities around ranking early actions. So as we go into those both concurrent actions and climate action adaptation planning process, we also understand what the commission might be looking at from a priority longer term. So part of what I'd ask you to do is kind of step back a little bit from this purpose-driven discussion right now and think also about the longer term benefit of the discussion. One is ensuring we're not overcomplicating the process, but also recognizing that as we set up the criteria for early actions, we could certainly leverage that to inform concurrent actions and climate action and adaptation planning initiatives over the next year to 2 years as we're going through that process. So I just wanted to take a pause and pull back and elevate a little bit.
Supervisor Saylor?
I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you've all been talking about. Michael, I think your point's very, very solid. One of the things I think you're talking about is how to guide your own decision making, weighing priorities as they come forward. And so you're a lot of times we see rubrics rather than scores. So you might have a scale that says high, medium, low for some of these criteria. And so instead of getting all bogged down on is it an 8.5 or a 12, or how do we quantify this or that topic? If what you're trying to do is to come to a group decision that you're all sort of on the same page about how you get there, you don't have to get real precise if you just have a commonly used rubric or scaling that might be helpful for some else, for some of the criteria.
Yeah, actually, I have participated in another process, and I would recommend it here as well. Exactly what Supervisor Saylor said, where there's high, medium, and low, and then we counted up the number of highs, and they used that as the group used that as the one input into their decision as to how to rank the projects. And Supervisor Saylor, this was the Yolo, and Supervisor Provenza, this was the Yolo bypass drainage and water infrastructure study. So it was nice because there was very specific criteria, and there was high, medium, low, and the criteria was very clear, but it wasn't a number in the end. It was just, these are the number of, you could see how many high scores it got, how many mediums, and how many lows. And then the group agreed that to just use the highs as the number of highs as their input, but it wasn't the sole factor in their decision for making priorities. Okay, so with that, because I know we're running out of time and everybody's time is valuable, I'll turn it back over to you, Taro, as the chair of the meeting. But what we are looking for here is an action to approve the timeline and the prioritization criteria with the changes discussed tonight.
So in essence, we're looking for a motion with the changes that you have heard in the discussion. I can tell that there are a number of changes. So, you know, it would be okay for us to bring it back. Of course, we're always interested in keeping the process moving. But if you're more comfortable with us just making the changes and bringing it back, we can also do that. So looking for a motion there.
So if I can understand what you're suggesting, Tara, is that because we did give you a lot of comments and there's a lot of intricacies and nuances by it. So I move that the staff redraft the eligibility criteria and prioritization criteria to reflect the comments of the commission this evening and bring it back for final approval by the commission at the next meeting.
Perfect. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Kim. I will Is there any commission discussion before I call the roll? Yes, NJ?
Just a quick question. I want to make sure that I'm staying focused and on track. So what the staff was asking of us is whether or not we approve the timeline, right? I know we went into discussing the criteria and everything. So my question is, are we asking the staff to wait until next month before we approve the timeline because you want to see the revisions? Are we focusing on the timeline as it is, which to me is very different from the criteria and the prioritization process? I just want to be clear on what we're voting on.
Yeah, that's a good clarifying question. Tara, I defer to you, but I mean, I think there could be two separate motions tonight. I think the timeline could be approved and separately there could be a motion on the criteria.
And I will support that personally.
So
Are there any impacts on the criteria that we've suggested that would impact your ability to meet the timeline that you set forth?
Well, you would be, well, yes, it would bump everything back a month because right now we have you in January. Right now we have, I'll just review the timeline again so that everybody's fresh in everybody's mind. So by December 30th, commission members would submit, additional early actions. And then we were planning in early January to update the memo. And if the prioritization criteria were approved tonight, then we could also provide the information on those actions and so that the commission could prioritize it in January. So you would then be prioritizing, so you would be approving the prioritization criteria in January. And then you would be in February, you would be prioritizing the actions. Then in March, you would be reviewing the project descriptions and associated budgets and receiving an update. And then in April, you would approve the grant strategy. So everything would be bumped back a month.
If that's the case, then I would modify my motion to include and adjust the proposed timeline accordingly.
I also second that.
Very good. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Reed,
Aye.
Commissioner Datel,
Aye.
Commissioner Allman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kim,
Aye.
Commissioner Serena,
Aye.
Commissioner White,
Aye.
Commissioner Mbodo,
Aye.
Commissioner Austin,
Aye.
and Commissioner Alvarez.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Our last item on the agenda tonight is item number 9, which is attachment D on your agenda packet. And it's an update on the working groups. And I believe, Carolyn, are you taking the lead in this discussion?
Sure. So the working groups are ad hoc and subject to the commission creation, and the chair would appoint liaisons per the staff reports, and the working group structure and responsibilities were integrated into the charter based off of the minutes as reflected in the minutes from the last commission meeting. Right now, we just appointed officers, so we have obviously not gotten to the stage in which we're establishing working groups, but I think it should be a discussion item for when and what types of working groups we would like to establish. I think that is dependent on, again, these two things. One, the seating of the sustainability commissioner and the development of the RFP. I think most working groups for a commission like this are in support of specific research topics and strategy developments related to the development of the climate action plan. But I think it's worth a discussion if there's any other topics besides those that would be pertinent to informing the climate action plan that the commission would like to consider creating. And I'll pass it to Michael to see if he had any other comments relating to the update of the timing of the working groups.
Thanks, Carolyn. I think the only other thing I would add is that in context to the request for proposals that's being developed by staff and will be reviewed by the commission, it may be valuable to have a early engagement by a working group with the on the request for proposals prior to it coming to the entire commission. And the commission would be recommending that RFP and the budget timeframes, the budget framing for that to staff and the Board of Supervisors. So it would allow for some early opportunities to guide the development of the RFP before it comes back to the larger commission for that recommendation. I think that's the only other process point I would add outside of the technical aspects of reviewing and supporting the climate action planning process itself with the consultant when that time comes.
And that made me think, thanks, Michael. One other point is, in addition to a potential working group to inform the RFP developments, stakeholder and community engagement is something that could potentially be initiated in advance of the climate action plan in terms of building partnerships and stakeholder relationships, rather than waiting for the beginning of the CAP development process. So those are just some initial ideas, but we wanted to really just open up for discussion if there are any other non-technical related to the development of the climate action plan working group focus areas that the commission would like to consider. Back to you, Tara. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. I lost my unmute button there for a second. Suzanne.
Thank you. I think Michael's recommendation is an excellent one. So I would agree that the early establishment of a working group around the RFP and the entire scope of work for the commission would be appropriate. And I also agree with Carolyn's recommendation that an early working group that we might want to establish not only with respect to stakeholder outreach, but also to creating a more systematic way of communicating and educating and creating awareness and mobilizing the various sectors, and not only in the development of the plan, but ultimately and maintaining that through implementation and supporting that activity. So it would be a tiered focus, starting with let's get people involved now, and then what kind of structures do we need on a permanent basis to assure and expand engagement. And then the other comment I was going to make is that I think it's important because in the working group, in the charter, the staff are called out as supporting at least the administration of these working groups and being engaged with them. And so the question would be, what's the staff capacity to, we can't have a dozen working groups. So we're probably going to need to prioritize on these and incrementally invoke them as capacity and need arises. So, this would be our quick start working groups, and then, we would get some of this stuff out of the way and then continue on as other topics emerge. And one way to inform that process would be to look at the recommendations for action in the sustainability plan that was adopted by the board, because there was some level of recommendation and actions and follow-up recommended in that effort, and some prioritization as well. And I think it would help inform the commission in terms of further development and establishment of working groups. One of them in particular that I have an interest in is around the area of local food. And I did want to, and how that intersects with the recommendations in the sustainability plan that pertain to the agriculture sector in general. Some of that is with respect to, agriculture as destination and economic development tool, but from a climate change perspective, I know that there are many of us on this commission very interested in how agriculture is done in the community, and I don't know how soon we want to do that, but I did want to mention with respect to the food security issue that there is another coalition that I belong to, and other people that are various of us here on this commission are affiliated with. That's a broad a broad coalition that involves UC Davis as well as some Dignity, or not Dignity, Community Health, and other stakeholders in organizations in the process, including Center for Land-Based Learning, et cetera. And so there are parallel activities going on that are relevant to what we're doing for the Climate Action Commission, but we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So in the absence of creating a working group or having a working group that has not comparable, but relevant undertakings, we should also want to discuss how we would integrate those two activities so we don't have two parallel activities ongoing. And I think that can be easily solved, you know, with liaisons and there's a lot of cross membership in some of these activities, but it's a structure that we should take a closer look at. And I know I've mentioned in the past the Climate Compact and also the staff group, Taro, that you mentioned in a previous meeting, that are already forums for exchange of information and the development of, you know, kind of everybody understanding what everybody else is doing, and, you know, the development of, you know, proposals and action items and new ideas, et cetera. So I'd like to explore a little bit more how we connect, but not duplicate those activities. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. NJ.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, because I'm coughing a little bit here. Excuse me. Yes, so I just wanted to let the commission know that I've been in touch with the California Alliance for Family Farmers, and which includes many of the, you know, family-owned farms in Yolo County. They had like a big meeting some time ago, and they expressed interest if there ever is a working group that will include farmers. They expressed interest in giving feedback and helping out with how carbon emission reductions, you know, what they're looking at, how they're being impacted, and some of the solutions that they've been considering. And the CAFS has an extensive experience also when it comes to policy makings and some notable victories there. So I think that will be a good stakeholder to consider adding to one of the working groups. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that you had mentioned that to me before. I'm glad that you brought it up today, because I really think it is a good match for the work that we're doing. Thank you for that. Any other comments? Robin?
I would like us to think about how we might best recruit some youth input into this whole process. They're so central to our concerns in the long run and such an important part of the mobilization. And would it be a good idea to have a separate youth working group, or to make sure that youth are represented on the other working groups? I'm not quite sure what the best structure would be, but I do think that that's a demographic of particular interest to us.
Great. Yes, thank you. Don?
Thanks. These last couple of comments really sparked my interest. The idea of integrating or aligning, finding out what other organizations and coalitions are up to, not necessarily duplicating or repeating or trying to, in some structured way, fold them in, but really connect with them. And I think CAF is certainly a good one. Climate Compact is another. And Robin's point about youth really excites me, because we're forming a youth commission for Yolo County that will be coming online in the first 6 months of 2022. And there will be 15 youth appointed, 3 from each of the 5 supervisor districts. They'll be looking at projects and activities, and so we'll have a built-in group that can be one of the ways that you can engage young people. SACOG also has what they call a Youth Leadership Academy, that will be doing work across the 6-county region. This will be their, I think, the 4th year of that effort. And Jesse Salinas's effort of the Yolo Empowerment Summit with youth from across the county is another catchment area for engaging young people. So it's not necessary, that doesn't, maybe won't meet all of your desires, but there are these efforts that are underway, and to the degree you can tap them, all the better. Makes it easier, and you don't have to go out and try to invent something that might already just be around the corner for you to capture.
Thank you. Supervisor Provenza. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. I really appreciate all the comments. I think definitely going in the right direction. I'm particularly interested in incorporating farmers and agriculture into our discussion. So we might want to seriously consider having an agricultural work group. Agriculture is our one of our prime, perhaps the prime economic driver in our county. And when we look to economic development, we often look to agriculture as a source of that development. I guess over time, some have viewed agriculture and the environmental movement as being on opposite sides, and that doesn't have to be that way, but sometimes that's how things are construed. So the idea of bringing farmers into the mix is great, not just for the optics, but for us to set an example of how things can be done better. Because if the agricultural practices change in a county that relies on agriculture, I think that sets a path for others as well as to how to address carbon reduction. And there's so much potential in that area that to me, if we can get a number of family farmers and others who are involved in agriculture in a working group, that would be fantastic. And I know Andrew's already doing some work in this area. So I see a lot of potential.
Thank you.
Welcome.
NJ?
Yes, so Tara, I wanted to very briefly circle back on something you'd mentioned when the commission was first started, which was that of the applications that we've received, there are some applicants who might be interested in joining some of the working groups. So I'm bringing that up again because I noticed that a certain number of applicants have the background in electric vehicle studies, research with UC Davis. So given that, and I don't mean to simplify the issue, but given that a bulk of the carbon emission issue has to do also with the vehicle, the machinery that is operated, I was wondering if it would be worth considering having a working group that will also focus a little bit on what's happening in that area in terms of not just policy, the work that's already being done by UC Davis and other institutions, and whether or not that can be integrated in some of the policies and recommendations we'll be making.
Absolutely. Thank you. Pelayo?
Yeah, to second the idea of creating a working group for agriculture, but I want to add that we might want to consider using a natural and working lands, which would include agriculture, but also areas like protected areas or areas in which it's a mix of, it's a protected area that has some agricultural use, and also to follow the what the state is doing with using that nomenclature of natural and working lands that does include agriculture in it.
Thank you. Bernadette?
Yeah, so similar. So me and I think a couple of other folks in the meeting today were on participated in the Mayor's Commission on Climate Change, and they had some technical advisory committees. So they had a built environment one and a mobility one. And so I think mobility, NJ I think was kind of hinting at that when we talk about mobility, just transportation of people, goods, services, et cetera. I think that could be a useful effort. And I just want to acknowledge that Andrew, for those who may be tuning in, Andrew put in the chat some potential working groups that could include an RFP working group, CAP stakeholder engagement, agricultural, food security. So as someone, I forgot who it was, but someone expressed earlier, there's a lot of things we could do. And what I would encourage us to do is think about sort of all the things, let's throw everything on the table. And I feel like a manageable number might be 3 or 4, just to kind of, because that may even be too many, but really trying to hone some of these pieces in. So what I wanted to put out there was looking at people and place. That might oversimplify things, but we keep talking about farmers. What about farm workers? Air quality, there's a lot of, components, again, from sort of this workforce and EJ issue, not just mobility, but also truck drivers. People depend on transit. There's all sorts of different things that we need to take into consideration. So that's one thing I might think about, is sort of the people aspect, those people whose lives, health, and livelihoods, et cetera, may be impacted by some of the policies that we are entertaining, and then looking sort of at the kind of land use implications, natural and working lands. That may be a way for us to try and bring comprehensively some of the things that we're talking about, and then maybe an actionable one. So RFP, that type of work, yes. Finance was another committee that we talked about. That is a little bit outside of the purview of what we're talking about, but thinking about sort of the what is required to make things, what are the logistics and what is the feasibility? So I think that sort of actionable aspect. And then there was also what was added in the Mayor's Commission on Climate Change later, was an equity tack. And so I keep talking about equity and EJ. We talk about food security, but there may be either that's sort of the people aspect or some other standalone piece.
Thank you. Great comments. Thank you. Are there any other comments? This is an item that doesn't require action by the commission, just the feedback, and we've gotten a lot of really good feedback. So I appreciate and thank you for all of that. Pelayo?
Yeah, it's a question for the climate action plan update. Will be using the same format and structure of the current climate action plan, or we'll start from scratch?
I see nodding, or negative, moving side to side. The short answer is it doesn't have to be that way at all. It's not intended to be a simple sort of dust off of the old and just change. We have a new lens. We have environmental justice, I think, as a lens that wasn't completely fleshed out previously. So we're looking at this as more of a new climate action plan rather than an update. Carolyn?
Yeah, I just wanted to enter back into the discussion regarding working groups, just the timing, that some of these working groups might be more appropriate in the near term and then could sunset for other working groups to replace it. I think Bernadette's point that 3 to 4 is that manageable number for kind of pushing it. I think obviously the RFP working group is something that would be a near term and would not be needing to continue past the RFP being put out and maybe selecting a consultant. So I just, for the discussion also, in addition to creating a list, maybe the consultant team can, or the county staff can come back with the recommendation on which maybe 1 or 2 to move forward with in the near term, and then potentially select 1 to 2 more after the CAP is underway as a potential suggestion. But I just wanted to re-enter into the discussion, the question of timing.
Thank you. Any additional comments? No, we're hungry. Want to go eat now? Very good. So this is the meeting, and we stand adjourned. And I want to thank everybody for your participation and for your energy and for being here present, helping us accomplish this goal. So we will adjourn now, and we'll see you in January. Stay tuned. Updates coming in 2 weeks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.